morning, happy Monday, and welcome back to my channel. It is a gross and gray Monday, but it looks like the daffodils are blooming in Columbus Circle, so let's go check those out. It's the little things that keep me going. Anyway, I'm just heading to campus. As usual, I'm going to my CAD class on Mondays, which hopefully there'll be something interesting to show you. And then I have to try to get myself to wind a warp today. So it's gonna be a busy day and hopefully we'll get a lot of things done. So let's do it.
I spent most of the day working on little technical things for my collection. I used this document to help me see everything that I've made so far in one place, just so I can make sure that the colors, the scale, the concepts, and everything else was working all together nicely. I also made a gigantic file with swatches of all of my digital prints, just so I could send that off to the campus print lab to print on some simple cotton fabric. After class, I went out for lunch with some of my friends, and then I went to the weaving room to wind a new warp since I was almost out of the warp that was already on my loom. I'm using the exact same yarn as before to make pretty much the exact same warp, which was 150 threads wide and 5.5 yards long. After class, I went for a walk to the biggest blick I've ever seen to get some supplies, which I'll show you later on in the video.
Hello again, I'm just walking home next to a horse and carriage. I finished up my very long day today. I had my CAD class in the morning where I just kind of like made plans for things. I had some fabric sent to the print lab and like kind of mapped out what I think the rest of my semester is gonna look like in terms of my projects. And then went to lunch with my friends, which was super nice. We got to catch up after spring break. And then I made my warp, which is just such an exhausting process, but I did it. It's done. So yeah, now I'm just gonna head home. I'm probably just gonna like make myself some food and take it easy. So I'll see you tomorrow. Hello, happy Tuesday. I just finished up with my internship and I'm gonna run some errands before heading home today. It is dumping rain and my coworker so kindly lent me this huge umbrella to stay dry on my way home, which is so sweet. Anyway, I needed to get something at a hardware store really quick and I was wondering if you wanted to see what a Home Depot in Midtown Manhattan looks like, because it's definitely an experience. Oh man, I just find that so funny. I've definitely frequented a lot of Home Depots in my life, and the ones in California looked more like this. They always smelled of lumber, they had huge garden centers, and there were tons of people running around doing massive construction projects, and this is not like that. So I hope you enjoyed that little field trip, and now I'm on my way to FIT, where I'm actually gonna go pick up some fabric prints, and hopefully those turn out all right. So let's go.
When I was at Blick earlier, I snagged a giant pile of square silk scarves to further experiment with tie-dye and shibori for my collection. I thought that buying these scarves would be a really fun way to create simple samples because they're almost the same price as buying yardage from the fabric store, but they come pre-cut and they have a nice little hem. So that way I can try out a bunch of different things with my acid dyes, and then when I'm all done with all this thesis project stuff, I can enjoy these scarves as really fun accessories. So I first started off my tie-dye experiments by twisting up one of the scarves just like you would for a super basic tie-dye, and I popped it into a mason jar. Then I covered it with a layer of ice and dusted it with some dye powder, and left it on the counter to melt just to see what would happen. Then I wanted to do another tie-dye technique that I had never tried before, but first I wanted to dye the scarf yellow so that there wouldn't be any white in the tie-dye design. While both of these scarves were doing their things, I worked on refilling my bottles of stock acid dye solutions using the recipes that I had created in the beginning of the semester in my big dye book. When the yellow scarf was all dyed and dried, I then started my arashi shibori experiment. This is a really popular dyeing technique which involves folding and wrapping a fabric around a tube and then scrunching it together to create the dye resists. After wrapping and scrunching the fabric as much as I possibly could, I painted over it with my neon red acid dye solution. And then, after steaming it and letting it fully cool, I unwrapped the whole thing to reveal my arashi shibori fabric. scarves actually turned out pretty cool. On their own, they're fairly simple, but I know that I'll have a lot of fun scanning them in and manipulating them in Photoshop, and then I can keep these scarves to either wear as is or to experiment with more in the future.
Hello, happy Wednesday. I'm heading home and it is storming really bad. I actually do have an umbrella, but the winds are so strong it literally almost like got me airborne, so I'm just keeping this thing rolled up and trying to speed walk home. When I get home, I actually have quite a few packages waiting for me that I'm really excited about because I got all the supplies that I need to do batik. If you've been following along for this semester so far, you would have seen that like in my painting on fabrics class, we did quite a bit of like wax resist, wax painting, and then over dyeing. So I was thinking about including some of that in my thesis collection because why not? It fits the theme and it's a whole lot of fun. So yeah, let's hopefully get home in one piece, get my mail, and then try to figure out how to turn my kitchen into a batik studio. Let's do it. Oh, okay, so the rain let up a little bit and it's giving me a chance to say hi again and to thank you for 10K subscribers. I just like can't believe that. I know this video is coming out well in the future, so I don't really know what my subscriber count is gonna be while you're watching this video, but today I'm officially celebrating 10K and I'm just like blown away. So yeah, I just wanted to say a quick thank you for following me and for supporting me and for believing in me, and yeah, this is a big milestone that I'm really excited about. Anyway, still walking home. Let's go batik.
For my batik projects, I ordered soy wax, which is one of the milder and safer wax options, and this is especially important when I'm doing all of this work in my kitchen at home. I started by filling a giant mason jar with the flakes of wax, and then I popped it into a water bath to gently melt it. Okay, so I have my wax boiling, and then I'm gonna show you this contraption that I just made. So this is my attempt at making a board with which I can pin my fabrics onto while I'm doing this batik technique, and this is essentially just two little foam boards that I tried my best to staple together, and then I wrapped them in just like a cheap tablecloth, and hopefully this will give me a good surface that I can just stick a pin into. And here's my fabric all pinned to the surface, and it seems to be holding up okay. So for my first little wax experiment, I just want to create like a texture that I can use in my photoshopping. So I want to try a crackle technique that I've seen before that's pretty typical for like wax prints and batik design. Essentially all I'm going to do is just cover this whole piece of fabric in wax, let it dry, crinkle it up with my hands, and then cover it in dye. And supposedly the dye is just going to seep through the cracks in the wax and create a pretty cool result. So let's hope that works out. After covering the whole thing in a few layers of wax and leaving it to fully cool, I scrunched and crunched it up. I didn't know that doing this would cause the soy wax to crumble into a super fine powder and scatter literally everywhere. It made a huge mess. I later found out that using paraffin or beeswax would have made for a less powdery experience, but like I said, I was going for the safest option in my kitchen setup here, so I just swept everything up before dyeing and continued on. For my dyes, I thickened my acid dye solution with a little bit of sodium alginate just to keep things from getting too watery. And here's how it turned out. I love it so much, both as a texture to explore in my collection and as a funky new accessory. I then wanted to make one more wax batik texture by splattering the wax all over my scarf. So first, using my paintbrush, I flicked the wax all over the white scarf. Then I painted the whole thing with a super light wash of blue dye. Once that dried, I went back in with some more splattered wax. And then I topped that with an even darker blue dye. I did one more round of the splattered wax. And then I painted it purple. And then I wrapped the whole thing to steam it. Let me show you really quick how I did that, because steaming is a really tricky process, and when I was trying to find resources online for steaming batiks at home, I couldn't find much that would actually work for my setup, so I ended up coming up with this system with my professor, and it actually worked out really well. Basically, the goal is to steam set the dyes and to remove all of the wax, but also not to let any of the fabric touch any water at any moment, so it's really tricky. So first, I covered the silk in a layer of paper towels, and then a layer of scrap cotton muslin fabric. I then rolled the whole thing up. When things heat up and get steamy, the wax is going to melt and transfer over to the paper and the muslin. So it's really important that the fabric is not in contact with itself at all and has lots of absorbent layers in between to catch the wax. I then rolled it into kind of like a cinnamon roll. And then covered that in another layer of muslin. This layer is mostly here just to make sure that any water condensation from the steaming process doesn't touch the fabric directly. And then I popped it into my steamer, let it steam on heat for about an hour, and then turned off the heat to let it cool. And here's how that fabric turned out. It has this really cool layered effect, like kind of a depth to it that I really like.
Good morning, happy Thursday. I'm heading over to campus where I have my painting on fabrics class, where I think we're gonna spend pretty much the entire time just figuring out what we're gonna be doing for our next projects. So I don't really know if there's gonna be anything super interesting to show you, but if there is, I definitely will. After that class, I have kind of like it's not really a critique, but it's more of like a presentation of everything I've been working on so far for my thesis collection. We have two of the department heads coming to class to like take a look at everything so they can plan out the museum exhibition that's gonna happen with all of our work. So I'm definitely nervous for that. My backpack is so heavy. It's filled with literally every single thing I've made so far, and yeah, it's a little bit nerve-wracking, but I'm also kind of excited. So yeah, let's get through this day.
For my painting on fabric's final project, I knew for sure that I wanted to do a silk painted scarf just because I was having so much fun with those techniques. My professor showed me this book from the 90s that is just filled with incredible inspiration and literally everything you could ever want to know about silk painting techniques. And I was so inspired. I also immediately found a copy of this book on Thrift Books to include in my own library because I just loved it. Then for our big thesis project meeting, I laid out everything that I had made so far onto my table to discuss with my professors. They really liked my project so far and were especially impressed with how deep I was diving into making every part of this collection from scratch, especially my dyes and my dye recipe book. That made me really happy just because color was definitely my favorite part of this whole project and where I was having the most fun. Also, while I was waiting for my turn for the critique, I came up with a wacky idea to simulate my designs onto clothing, and surprisingly, my professors were into it too.
Hello again, I'm just walking home after my long day. Today was really long. I don't know why it felt like that, but I'm just like absolutely exhausted and I really just want to go home and lay down. Overall, my critique went really well. The professors that were coming to our class to kind of figure out the museum exhibitions and all of that really responded well to my work and gave me some really good things to kind of like put forth in the next samples that I have to make, so that feels good. I also figured out my whole texture mapping situation, which feels so good. That's such a huge relief. I usually struggle with that. That's the whole idea of like photoshopping my designs onto models, and I feel like to do that, you need to find models wearing white clothes because it works best when you're photoshopping to have like a white background. But the issue that I keep having is that like I want fun clothes, like things that are like expressive and interesting. But odds are like those clothes aren't going to be produced in white. So it kind of creates a challenge because like what's actually available to me and easy to Photoshop just doesn't really fit the vibe, if that makes sense. So I kind of thought like, okay, if I can't find any models that I feel like are really fitting what my collection is supposed to look like, why not just like try to make it up and make it my own? And that's exactly what I did, and I'm actually really pleased with how it turned out. So yeah, I have those 3 little models that I showed you in the video clip, and they're gonna accompany my designs just to show like how the designs layer on one another and how they might look in an outfit and blah blah blah. Anyway, I'm just gonna wrap it up for today and I will see you tomorrow. Happy Sunday. So I'm just working hard, starting my loom, and I realized that there were a couple things that I've been doing this weekend that I haven't updated you on yet. So you know those silk scarves that I've been making throughout the week? I have my tie-dye, my crackle, and then my like splatter painted one. Well, those have now been turned into digital print, so let me show you those. So this is my first one. This is that tie-dye scarf that I made with just like twisting up the scarf and then ice dyeing it. And it has now become this digital print, which I'm actually pretty happy with. I wasn't really sure at first about the brown color, but then after like holding it up with the rest of my designs, I realized that I actually needed more brown in my collection because it's only showed up in like little bits and pieces. So this actually, I think, works out pretty well. The next one is this crackle scarf, which you saw me make by covering a whole scarf in wax and then scrunching it up and painting it with turquoise paint. And now it's become this beautiful yellow crackle design just because I needed some yellow in my collection, and having a nice kind of like simple texture like this just kind of pulls things together in a way that I'm very happy about. Lastly, I have my splatter painted one, which you saw me do like layers of just splattered wax and then painting and then another layer and then more painting. And this one has now become this design, which to me almost feels like kind of a, you know, when you have like tortoiseshell glasses or tortoiseshell like jewelry and stuff, it kind of has that vibe and I kind of really like it. So yes, those 3 scarves turned into these 3 patterns that I just showed you, and I'm happy with how it's turning out. I needed some just like simple coordinates to tie things together, and I think they're perfect. So my goal for the rest of the day is to finish up with my loom threading so that I can set myself up for a week of weaving next week. And this is gonna take me a while. I'm already over it. So yeah, I feel like this is probably a good place to end the vlog just because I'm literally gonna be here all day doing this, and that's not the most fun thing to watch. Thank you so much for joining me on this week of adventures. If you want to stick around and see how my whole thesis collection turns out at the end of the semester, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and hopefully I'll see you in my next video.